Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Knowledge Bank. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Today's Knowledge Bank is presented by James Crosby-Wrigley, who is Head of Sustainability at Advantage Utilities. The webinar is being recorded today, so it will be available to watch back this afternoon if anyone would like to watch it back. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please submit them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we will try to get through as many as possible at the end. I will also have a copy of the slides available, so if anyone would like a copy of them after the webinar, please get in touch with me and I will be able to send them to you via email. James will also be at our Leasehold London conference next week, presenting one of our workshops. So if you are registered to attend the conference, please do go and have a chat with him, see the workshop. If you're not booked at the moment and you would like to book, there's still time to book tickets on the website, or you can get in touch with me. Otherwise, I will now hand you over to James to begin the webinar.
Thank you very much, Vicky. Hi, everybody. I'm James, Dr. James Crosby-Wrigley. It still feels weird saying it. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself and the company I work for. So I finished my PhD at a place called the University of Cambridge in 2021. And was really fortunate to get hired by Advantage Utilities. The premise of my employment is essentially to look at ways of decreasing the amount of money that businesses and people spend on their energy costs, not only through understanding how the market is varying and how to get the best contracts, but most importantly for me, is understanding what technologies are available that will decrease the amount that you purchase from the grid. And that's something I'm particularly passionate about because renewable technologies, self-sufficient technologies, they decrease the amount that you purchase from the grid. And what do we know? We know that the grid is expensive and we know that the grid is very polluting. So we're ticking two boxes: increasing the amount of money that businesses save and also decreasing the amount of carbon emissions that they are producing. Anyhow, so let's crack on. So the title of this is called An Integrative Approach to Mitigate Energy Costs and Enhance Net Zero. And I have broken this down into four key areas, four key topics I want to discuss. The first thing I want to do is I want to provide an overview of the energy market. So that's how the wholesale market and the non-energy cost market has varied historically and what it may look like in the future. Then I want to talk about an overview of what we're calling the climate emergency and what kind of legislation has been introduced by the government in light of global warming and large-scale climate change. Then I'm going to get into the meat and the bones of this. I'm going to talk about the technologies which are immediately available to businesses that can help them reduce their energy spend and decrease their carbon emissions. What I really like to do is I don't just want to talk about theory and talk about technologies. I want to give real world examples. So I'm really fortunate that because of the business I work for, we've had the opportunity to implement a lot of these technologies. And I'll give you examples of real life case studies where people have integrated these technologies. And then what's really important is we want to have an integrative approach. So we want to talk about how we can maybe enhance businesses to have a more sophisticated way that they approach energy. Not only are you looking at the way that you decrease the amount of energy you're purchasing, but also making sure that when you purchase your energy, you're purchasing it at the most opportune times as dictated by the market. So let's do this. Let's start with the energy market overview. So what we've got here is a graph of wholesale energy markets for the gas and for the power. On the left-hand side, we've got Great British pounds per megawatt hour, and on the right-hand side, we've got Great British pounds per therm. Let's ignore what the therm means because we can just divide it by a certain figure and it'll come out as a kilowatt hour. Now, what we know is that the price of gas and the price of electricity are intrinsically linked. Now, the reason why they're so intrinsically linked is actually because gas forms approximately 40% of all energy that's generated in the United Kingdom through gas combustion engines. So the price of gas is the biggest controlling factor on the price of energy. And my word, what a absolute roller coaster we've had since January 2021. I've highlighted the key events on here, which have caused the wholesale price of energy to be so volatile. So in approximately what we first started observing in the back end of October of 2021 was what we called the energy crisis. And that was just due to uncertainties on how much gas we had stored in the system leading into winter. Well, that storage uncertainty came to fruition, and we were genuinely quite short on the amount of gas that we had stored, so that caused the price of energy to spike. What we also had coinciding with this is a severe escalation in tensions between Russia and Ukraine. And what ended up happening is, we all remember, Russia invaded Ukraine. And that caused the price of energy to skyrocket, because we get so much of our energy from Russia, and there's a major gas pipe that runs through Ukraine to the United Kingdom and to the rest of Europe. So there was real uncertainties over what's going to happen to that gas supply. And unfortunately, our biggest fears were realized. And I'm calling it Nord Stream uncertainty. Nord Stream is the major gas pipe that connects Russian gas with the rest of Europe. And unfortunately, that went out of action. That was, some would call it sabotage, other people might call it unplanned, irreparable maintenance. Anyway, that went off, and that decreased the amount of supply of gas that was coming into the United Kingdom and the rest of Europe. And simple economics, if you decrease the amount of supply going into a market, but you don't change the amount of demand, the price for that commodity is going to go up. And in this case, it went up by an astronomical amount. And in just terms of the wholesale value, so energy costs are made up of wholesale, that's how much you buy the commodity for, and then it's made up of non-energy costs. That's how much it costs to get the energy from the generator to your meter. The wholesale went as high as 80 pence per kilowatt hour for the power. That was the highest we've ever seen it. It was, and to be fair, it was causing a lot of businesses and a lot of homeowners to really feel the squeeze in a way that was unprecedented in the energy market. Now, thankfully, the market has come down quite a lot in this period. There's two key reasons for that. One of them is that we have a lot more gas that we're obtaining from the United States of America. We're consistently getting liquefied shipments of gas coming in from America, which is increasing the amount of supply we have going into our market. And the other thing that happened is we had an energy budget. And look, Theresa May, she is not Theresa May. Oh my God, I've forgotten her. Oh well, not important. There was a new policy that capped the price that energy can be bought for. That caused the markets to have a lot more confidence, and it brought the price down a lot. And since this point, excuse me, we've experienced a market correction, and now we're very, very almost back at pre-energy crisis levels of cost of energy, which is great going forward. But what we do have to balance with is, when you buy energy, it has the non-commodity cost element. And this non-commodity cost has been increasing over the past 12 years consistently. Back in 2012, things such as climate change levy didn't really exist. And we were paying an additional 4 pence per kilowatt hour for our non-energy costs. This has consistently increased every single year, with 2022 and 2023 having a value of approximately 9.8 pence per kilowatt hour just in the non-commodities, and those are forecasted to increase every single year. So what we really have is, what is our forecast going to look like? We've got a combination of what the wholesale market is doing, and we've got a combination of what the non-energy cost legislation is doing. When we combine both of these items, we get the cost to the end user. So let's compare historic prices. So historically, we would have a non-energy cost of, say, 4 pence per kilowatt hour, maybe 5 pence per kilowatt hour, and we would have a wholesale or a commodity cost of approximately 40 to 50 pounds per megawatt hour, or 4 pence to 5 pence per kilowatt hour. When you combine these costs, we were looking at approximately 10 to 15 to as high as 18 pence per kilowatt hour. The gas price was similarly low. We were trading at approximately 2 to 2.5 pence per kilowatt hour with minimal non-commodity costs. So that's what it looked like in the past. What does it look like in the future now? Well, I assure you this room would be a lot bigger if I actually knew the answer, but this is my best understanding of where the market is. So what we've got is the current price of wholesale electricity around that 6 to 8 pence per kilowatt hour mark. And then what we have are these, which is shown by this graph on the left-hand side. Then on the right-hand side, we have our non-energy cost forecasts. Now that's trading, or that's legislated at approximately 10 to 13 pounds per kilowatt hour. Then what we need to do is add on something called capitalist profits. So we also have to add on supplier margins, because look, that's how the world goes around at the moment. So what we end up having is a price of approximately 19 pence per kilowatt hour to 24 pence per kilowatt hour. That's approximately where the market is today, and the gas is between 4 pence per kilowatt hour to 6 pence per kilowatt hour. What does that mean? It means that on the back of the energy crisis, the cost of energy to the end user is very high. So that's an overview of where the market is. Now I'm going to bring you up to speed on the basics of the climate emergency and some of the more high observable legislation. So this is a graph which is pretty much exactly what I want to show. What we know about the climate is its temperature dependence is directly proportional to the composition of the atmosphere. You've got certain compounds which have more greenhouse gas effects. A really good example of this is CO2. CO2 retains more energy than, say, other forms of compounds, so that when there's more of that in the atmosphere, it retains more energy. And energy is directly proportional to heat. So as we have more of this CO2 or greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, we retain more heat in the atmosphere. That was a complete butchering of climate change and greenhouse gas mechanisms, but it will do for now. Now, what we have is, since the 1960s, the amount of CO2 or CO2 equivalent compounds in the atmosphere has dramatically increased from approximately 320 parts per million to over 400. And by having that additional CO2 in the atmosphere, it's causing the climate to heat up. Now, on the right-hand side, we've got a baseline. So the actual baseline is what we call pre-industrial temperatures. And what we see is the tipping point was approximately in 1980, when the average temperature recorded throughout the world exceeded the baseline consistently. And what we had at this, I believe this graph was last updated in 2017, is in this graph, we're on average 1 degree Celsius warmer than we previously were. Now we're actually up to 1.3 degrees Celsius. So yes, the climate has changed. We are actually at a point where now the climate has changed, and what we're trying to do is limit the amount that it is going to change, because basically if you've got warmer temperatures, you end up creating a bit more of inhospitable environments, which has really bad effects on global weather patterns, and it really affects the actual ecosystems and causes large-scale devastation, basically. So we're trying not to make that happen much more than it's already happening. So what we have is what I've called macro legislation. So macro legislation is, say, global policies or United Kingdom global laws that have come into action. And what we as the United Kingdom are doing is trying to limit the amount of heat, the amount of global warming to just 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees Celsius. And the way that that has come into fruition was through what's called the net zero emissions law. This is actually a law that the government will be held to, and if they don't meet it, then there's lawsuits, I suppose. And what they have to do is mean that the amount of CO2 equivalent or greenhouse gases that they're emitting each year is the same or less than the amount which is being drawn down by the planet. So that is a law by 2050 that the UK must be a net zero economy. And this followed on the back of the Climate Change Act of 2008, which basically said that climate change is a thing. So that's the macro legislation that we're all working towards. Now let's bring this a little bit more micro legislation. So in 2021, the Parliament presented to the Secretary of State the Heat and Building Strategy. Now, that's a 180-page document, which is actually really interesting, to be fair to it. It is quite interesting, but I'm just going to give you the main legislative takeaways. The first one is that all non-domestic buildings must have an EPC rating of at least as category C. So you've got A to F, F being failed, like really bad, really inefficient, and A being great, well done. So it must have a rating of at least C by 2027, and that should say, and a category B by 2033, not 2023. My bad on the typo. So that's one piece of the micro legislation that's coming into effect. Another one is, this is not a law yet. This is not a law. It's to do with gas boilers. This is not a law. There's a lot of talk about no new gas boilers by 2025. That is only for new builds. So if you're looking at building a new property, there's no law that says this yet, but it's becoming increasingly likely that as of 2025 and onwards, you could have no new gas-fired boilers. What we are anticipating is the legislation by 2035 to say no boilers, no boilers, no new boilers anymore. That's what we're expecting. And then the last is to do with it's called the Energy Savings Opportunity Scheme and the Streamlined Energy Carbon and Reporting. It's a piece of legislation that businesses have to comply to. Currently, it's just reserved for the largest of the small, medium, and enterprises and the very large businesses. And we're expecting that to expand into the mid-market and maybe even into the smaller SME market. So that's some of the buildings legislation. And then, of course, you've got your transport legislation. And what's really obvious is the low emission zone, ultra low emission zone, and congestion charge areas are expanding to try and encourage more electrification of of people's fleet, of the public fleet, of businesses, transportation, to move away from these greenhouse gas combustion engines and move towards electrification. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. It's the law, though. So that's where we're at in terms of micro legislation. So what do we know? Well, we know that the cost of energy is very expensive, and we also know that we're in a little bit of a climate emergency. So how can we find ways that we can decrease the amount of energy or powering gas that a building is consuming, that your buildings are consuming, and also decrease the amount of their associated carbon emissions? So what we know, grid is expensive, 19 to 24 pence per kilowatt hour. This particular figure of 0.19 kilograms of CO2 per kilowatt hour, that's high. Take my word for it. There's a lot of carbon that's being emitted per every kilowatt that you consume. And what I really want to focus on is scope 1 and scope 2. So carbon emissions, or CO2 equivalent emissions, are categorized into 3 distinct scopes. So your scope 1 is how much waste is your actual building facilities and your transport, how much is that accounting for? So that's your scope 1. And what we're really focusing on there is transportation. The future is supposed to be electrification, maybe hydrogen in there somewhere. That's what we're looking at. Then we're also looking at scope 2. Now that's the amount of emissions that are associated with your purchase of energy from the grid. So what we want to do is basically bring that down. So what I'm focusing on here is mitigating the amount that you're consuming from the grid by improving the infrastructure so that you decrease the amount that you're consuming. And I have two very simple philosophies that I always try and work to, and the team here at Advantage always try and work to. And that's, the first one is, the greenest form of energy generation is also the most affordable method of consumption. So renewable generators such as rooftop solar PV have had such a dramatic advancement in their technology. They've also had a real improvement on their supply chains, which means that they can now produce energy at a fraction of the price that you would have otherwise been consuming from the grid. And I'll provide worked examples of this. And then the second one is, the cheapest and greenest form of energy is that which is not consumed at all. It's really obvious, but when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about energy efficiency. So this is where you make modifications to your existing infrastructure through different technologies that don't change how they operate. We're not asking your building to change how it operates, but we're asking it to have newer tech and more efficient technologies that consume less gas and or electricity, but have the same amount of performance as their pre-existing equivalents. May even perform better, to be fair, may even perform better. So the way that we try and approach this is through a five-step journey. So first thing is understanding the site, understanding the building, understanding the people. Like what are you actually looking to achieve? Are you looking to achieve net zero? Are you looking to decrease your costs? Or do you want to do a bit of both? Then the second thing I'm going to want to do, or we're going to want to do, is get as much data as possible. We're basically a data company. What we want to do is understand how much you're spending on your energy and how much your associated emissions with that are through the different scopes as outlined earlier. Then we enter into the stage 3. So once we've got the data, we've understood the site, we've done our investigations, we may have even had some of your ESOS reports. Once we've taken that, then we can begin our consultative approach. That's where we start saying, okay, these are the opportunities identified. Actually, what kind of budgets do you have available? What's your timelines? What's your motivating factors? And actually produce a set of technologies and a set of solutions that would match what you're trying to achieve. And then we enter into stage 4, which is finally what I call get stuff done. So this is actually where we start installing technologies and start making that building upgraded and start decreasing the amount of load that your building is pulling from the grid overnight. That's the plan, and that's where we actually get it done. And then, of course, the final step is, okay, great, you've made these savings. Let's report this, let's certify your journey to net zero, and let's do it all again. Let's see, this is the next opportunity we've got. This is the next amount of resources that it's going to require from you. Can we get it done? And that's how we like to approach things, because net zero is a big topic, big question, really big. So let's make it broken down to simple steps, and that's how we try and do this. So this brings me on to, how do we get it done? What are the technologies available? So this particular mantra is towards the idea that it is cheaper for you to produce your own energy than it is for you to buy it from the grid. So a key example of this is rooftop solar. Rooftop solar is unrivaled technology. Other examples include a wind turbine. If you have a particular area of land, probably not in London, which is not too close to residential housing, then yeah, a wind turbine would be great, but it's not for everyone. It's not for everyone. Then you've also got hydropower, very, very, very niche. Do you live near quite a major river or quite near a major stream? That's a great origin, great source of renewable power. And of course, we've got battery storage, which can be integrated with any of the 3 previous ones. So heat pumps is a huge conversation. Heat pumps is a huge conversation because there's 2 ways to view it. One of them is it's unrivaled in its mechanism for decreasing associated carbon expenditure, for decreasing carbon, because you're moving from gas to electricity, and for every 1 kilowatt hour of electricity, you would have otherwise needed 3 kilowatt hours of gas. So you're decreasing your carbon by 2/3 overnight. The issue we have with heat pumps is they are expensive. They are really expensive and they're quite hard to model. But they do offer a bit of a savings. They do have a payback, but it's not the easiest technology to get your head around while it's still improving in its efficiencies. Of course, we're looking at electrification of the fleet, so we want to talk about EV charging. And then just tacked on the end here is something called hydrogen. Hydrogen is a huge conversation that's probably not going to become a major part of people's energy transition discussions for at least the next 5 to 10 years, but it's something that we're ready for. So here's an example consultation that we've undertaken for a project that's in existence. So the first thing we want to do is we need to have our conversation, and we want to get your data. You need to get data. Without data, you're just guessing. And what we're trying to do is minimize the amount of guesswork as much as possible. And the best way to do that is data collection. We want to specify where your site is, what the geography is, and we want to have any previous reports that you've got, say an ESOS report, a SECA report, a building management annual review, and we want to produce our recommendations from there. From there, We then want to design the system. So we are quite good at designing things. It's quite a skill of the department and the team here. And what we can do is completely design the system, the specifications, the equipment that you want, and we can get a very, very, very accurate price and different financing mechanisms that you may be interested in. Then we want to do is make sure that you're getting the best value for your money. So, of course, as a consultancy, we want to take the market and provide your opportunity to the market to get the best value and returns. And then the last step is we don't just want to design the system. We don't just want to have you guys purchase the system. We want to make sure that what we're specifying and what we're saying is what's being delivered. So that's why we've got to work with the site teams. We've got to navigate any legal constraints. We've got to manage any aftercare. These things need cleaning. These things need annual inspections. We need to make sure that you're aware of these costs before you commit to them. And of course, make sure that it is doing as we hoped / promised it would do. So that's an example of our consultation. And here's an example of a real life system in action from one of our I&C clients, industrial and commercial. So they installed, this particular company, Silverline, installed a 589 kilowatt peak system. It's massive, it's huge. It's not directly transferable to every property, but it's a really good case study to refer to. So of this system, it's going to generate approximately 500,000 kilowatt hours a year, or half a gigawatt. It's very big. And of that, we sized the system so that it would have 75% self-consumption. What that means is that of all, say, if of the 500,000 kilowatt hours of energy that would be generated, 375,000 of that would be consumed on site. Now, when this project was installed, it was right at the start of the energy crisis. So this customer was on 30 pence per kilowatt hour, which was really quite high. So the first year, they made a savings of £112,000. It was excellent. And it ended up making its return on investment within 4 years. Yeah, 4 years, which it's a great investment. But the system, most importantly, is designed to last for 25 years. So if we've got 25 years that it's capable of lasting for, that gives us a long-term time that it can generate and save power. Over that 25 years, we expect it to generate 12 gigawatt hours or 12 million kilowatt hours and save 9 million kilowatt hours. That's the equivalent value, if we average it 25p, of £2.2 million worth of savings, with a lifetime benefit the best metric I like to use is something called the lifetime cost of electricity, sometimes referred to as the levelized cost of electricity. That's the total amount of energy that's being generated, that's kilowatt hours, divided by the total cost of the system. So that's the installation costs and the maintenance costs. For 25 years, this system will generate energy that costs 7 pence per kilowatt hour. Snap my hand off. I think that's great. A renewable generator that's only 7 pence per kilowatt hour in today's market of 19 to 24p, wonderful. There's also a lot of government incentives. So the government does want people to purchase these systems. There's two main forms of investment allowance. You've got something called full capital expensing or annual investment allowance. That's where you're allowed 100% of the cost of the installation to be deducted from your year-end corporation tax. What I've done is, and then the other one is something called a first-year allowance, which is 50% of the value deducted from your year-end corporation tax. So I've given you a worked example here. Say if you've got a project that costs £100,000, you've got a first-year allowance or a special rate allocation of £50,000. If you're at the 19% tax bracket, that gives you a total saving of £9,500 that you don't have to pay in tax. Or if you're at the 25% tax bracket, that gives you £12,500 that you don't have to pay in tax, which is great. So they want you to do this. This brings me on to my next set of technologies, which is the ability for a site to become more energy efficient. And I believe that this is a huge area of opportunity, especially for managed properties. So the key ones that we can look at are something called a smart building technology. And that's a technology such as Hive. Hive's an excellent example where it is automated to only use energy when it's actually needed, as opposed to just be on a timeline or to be on a loop. It's got a dynamic control which can be linked to occupancy levels, to external air temperatures. It can be linked to well, those are the two real key ones, to be honest with you. It can be linked to those so that only the amount of energy and gas and heat is being produced as would be needed by the site. We've also got looking at more energy efficient boilers. So boilers are still allowed for homes which have been built, domestic and non-domestic facilities, anything built before 2025, that's what the legislation is leaning towards, can still have a gas boiler. So let's get you a more efficient boiler. Say, for example, if you've got a boiler that was built in the 1980s, that would have approximately 77, 78% efficiency, whereas a modern day, ultra high efficient condensing boiler, it's going to have 95 to 98% efficiencies. That's decreasing the amount of gas you need to make by 20%. We're also going to also look at LED lighting, which is the lowest hanging fruit available for energy savings. We'd also look at voltage optimization, which is a really exciting technology. And of course, if you've already got a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system that is electrified, let's make sure that that is A, sized correctly, and B, operating with the most efficient technologies so that we can change a few things around in there. So let's give you a case study. This is a general practitioner's office in I want to say it's in the Midlands. I want to say it's in Solihull. So they had 382 non-LED light fittings. Now, why did they install LED lights? The easy answer: LED lights are 75% more efficient. Well, they decrease the amount they need. A quarter of the energy to run that fluorescent and halogen lights do. Very simple. And when we did this, what we saw is the calculated 11.5 hours a day for 260 days a year. That would save this particular facility 52,000 kilowatt hours of electricity per year. What's also really good is that they have a 10-year life cycle, whereas most halogen bulbs are 2 to 3 years. So you also save on your OPEX. You don't need to replace them as much. So it's less faff for your buildings maintenance managers to have to look after. And it's got a really great payback. It pays itself back in less than 2 years. What's also good is by having this 10 years, the replacement's approximately £680 a year for this site. And then when we do the carbon savings, it's 10,000 kilograms or 10 tons of CO2 per year. Great. Less OPEX, less energy spend, and of course, less carbon emissions. For this client, we're also really lucky that we installed a small 34.85 kilowatt peak system. Overall, that has brought their energy consumption down by approximately 50%. They are now consuming 50% of the energy that they once were, which is great, and also means they're emitting 50% of the scope 2 carbon that they once were. Voltage optimization. I like this technology. So what's really interesting about voltage optimization is you're changing the actual grid that's coming into your facility. So let's do some very basic physics. What we know is that wattage, which is how you are billed, your energy bills and your carbon emissions are calculated based on wattage. Wattage is directly proportional to voltage and amplitude. Therefore, when we decrease the amount of voltage that's coming into a site, we therefore decrease the amount of wattage that a site is using. So by having this technology, reducing the voltage, we therefore reduce the wattage. As a result, this particular facility was oversupplied with the voltage that it actually needed. This facility was operating at 220 volts, but the incoming supply was 248 volts. So we were able to bring that down to 220, which is the optimum for the site, and decrease the amount that they were spending on energy by 8% instantaneously. This had a combined saving of 135,000 kilowatt hours a year, which is an estimated yearly saving of £33,000 or £34,000 a year at 25 pence per kilowatt hour. What's really good is it had a really rapid payback. It was less than 2 years, and the system, it's warranted for 25 years. There are no moving parts. There's no heat production, so it is hypothetically capable of existing for 50 to 100 years. If it's serviced. And over the 25-year warranty period, that's going to have a saving of just shy of £845,000, which is really wonderful. And then this is me shamelessly taking a selfie picture with a boiler because I thought that this project was great. So this particular project was to do with a school. So this school has a swimming pool, and the boilers are in use 24 hours a day to make sure that the water temperature remains at a constant temperature that's safe. So what happened is the boilers broke. So we were really lucky that they reached out to us to see if we could provide a solution. And we replaced their boilers with 2x120 kilowatt Strebel condenser boilers. The previously existing boilers were operating at 80% efficiency, and these new boilers that were installed were operating at 95% efficiency, which for this particular customer saved them over 100,000 kilowatt hours a year of gas, or if it was at 9 pence, saved them £9,000 a year. What's also really great is it was saving them 19 tons of CO2. So yeah, I'm the sad person that takes selfies with boilers because they excite me, because they're good for the environment and good for purse strings. So yeah, that was an exciting project. Now, sometimes we get really lucky and we get to work on multiple technologies at the same time for an existing client. So for this particular project, we were able to install solar PV, and we were able to install voltage optimization, and they were able to make some of their BMS upgrades and just whittle around with some of their operational choices. And what I've got here is two graphs. These are the two buildings that we were able to work on. So the grey is what their operations and energy consumption was before any of the technology, and the green shows their energy consumption after these technologies. So we installed approximately 890 kilowatt peaks of solar, and we installed 2 times voltage optimization devices. What this actually did was decrease the total amount of energy that they were buying from the grid by 58%. They went down from consuming over 1.6 gig or 1,600,000, and they reduced that by 960,000 kilowatt hours a year. This is worth approximately 240 grand a year, and it's probably one of the most exciting projects I've had the opportunity to work with, because it's excellent for the environment, excellent for cash flow, and really good for their ESG credentials. The last thing I want to talk about is how we integrate enhancing the self-sufficiency and efficiency of a site with having a more sophisticated mechanism of purchasing the energy that you still need to have from the grid, otherwise known as a sophisticated energy. And that's through your procurement activities. So, of course, we as a energy consultancy work with over 40 different energy suppliers to try and get the best value out there. Now, there's 2 ways that we view this. You can either view this through the way that we try and control wholesale prices, and the way that we try and control non-energy costs or non-commodity costs. So pass-throughs where you just let it all, where you basically have the default government legislation apply at the end of each calendar year or each operational year, and then you've got a blended where we do our best to guess what it's going to be in the next 2-3 years and have that as a blended cost. It's what you would call like a peace of mind kind of way of controlling future energy non-commodity costs. And where we really excel is how we try and manage the wholesale element. So this is through flexible procurement and through fixed energy purchasing. So a fixed energy purchasing is, hello, I really like the price of energy today. I would like to fix it for the next 1 to 3 years. Or what we can also do is take it a bit more sophisticated through flexible purchasing. So here's an example of one of our flexible purchasing strategies. Instead of having a traditional mechanism where you pay a fixed price on a fixed day for 12 to 24 months, what we do is we enter into a volume framework where over the next 12 months you want to consume say a million kilowatt hours of gas or a million kilowatt hours of power over that time period. Well, we've agreed that we will purchase this volume. However, when we purchase the volume is when we believe to be opportune times in the wholesale market, which over the past 2 years is, well, especially over the past 12 months in what we've called a declining market, means that we're able to make significant energy savings. And this is an example, this is a real world example, this is one of our real world examples of one of our trading strategies. So when this basket was set up, the price of energy for the commodity element was trading between 450 and 500 pounds per megawatt hour, or 45 to 50 pence per kilowatt hour. What we did is held off on our purchasing and made sure that it was made at opportune times in the market. And instead of being fixed at this 45 pence per kilowatt hour, it's now come down to 91 pounds per megawatt hour, or 9.1 pence per kilowatt hour, making a saving of almost 80% on the wholesale costs. Don't want to get too excited because I'm not the energy trader that did any of this, but I'm very proud of whoever did this. So that's an example of how we try and have a more sophisticated mechanism to how people purchase their energy, as well as have more self-sufficiency. And the last thing I want to do is give you a client testimonial from one of our frameworks. So we're really lucky that we get to work with a company called Faraday Property Management, especially Janie. Janie's head of our property management division. She's brilliant. And they came to us with a very important predicament. Their gas contract expired right in the middle of that huge peak in the market, and they were being offered a gas price which had historically been at 3 to 4 pence per kilowatt hour at 21.26 pence per kilowatt hour. Yikes! That's a 3,000% increase, something like that, 2,000% increase. Crazy. So what we did is we said, look, let's not fix, let's put you onto this framework, and that's exactly what we did. And what we ended up doing is instead of executing at 21.26p, we followed the market, and it averaged out at 12 pence per kilowatt hour over that 12-month time frame, which of course for 3.4 gigawatt hours is worth just over £340,000 for that one calendar year. And of course, very grateful for the testimonial, but I'm more grateful for the trading team and for Janie for instilling this product into them so that they could manage their energy costs. That's everything from me. Thank you very much.
Hi, James. Oh, got a bit of a delay on my video.
All right.
I'm just looking. We haven't got no questions at the moment. If anyone has got anything that they would like to ask, if you want to submit it in the Q&A box. Otherwise, we will finish up shortly. No, nothing coming in. That's normally a good sign. I think that normally means that you've covered pretty much everything within the webinar. Lovely. Okay, well, thanks so much for your time today, James. If anyone, like I said, is coming to Leasehold London next week, please do come and see James, say hello, have a chat. Otherwise, if you want to get tickets, get in touch with me. The webinar has been recorded, so I will send you an email with a link to the recording should you wish to watch it back. If you would like a copy of the slides, as I said, just let me know and I can email them to you.
I think I've got a question here from Gavin Betty.
Oh yeah, there's one just come in. So it says in regards to switching to LED, I think the question is cut off, Gavin. I don't know if you can submit the rest because it just says sometimes the units at the moment, but it hasn't got the rest of that. Okay, sometimes the units, as they're switched on and off more frequently than designed.
That's a fair point. So that's to do with the controls. So the LED light itself is probably not the problem. What I would answer to that, Gavin, is the control is the most important area. So say, for example, you can have motion sensor. And if you've got a motion sensor, that's probably the ideal because it's only being turned on when it's needed. But if you've got a manual flick or you've got a BMS system, then it's all about making sure that that's been optimized correctly. I hope that answers your question. It's all about, I think that's more to do with the control side of an LED light than the actual LED light itself, which, thank you, Gavin.
Yeah. Thanks, Gavin. I think that's it, unless there's anything else there coming in.
Right, well, I'll be at Leasehold Hold London next week. It would be great to see any of you there, and we can chew some fat, so to speak.
Thanks, James. Thanks for your time today. Thanks to everyone that joined, and hopefully we will see you on the next webinar. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye, James.